Okay,
Hold on.
welcome. All right.
15 seconds. It just takes a little longer on the YouTube. I had to restart it.
Okay. All right. It just showed as live on mine.
Okay, now I see it and it's muted. You are good to go.
Okay. Thank you and welcome to the March 28th special meeting of the Board of Estimate and Taxation. Appreciate everybody's time tonight. We're here to continue our deliberations on the operating budget for the coming fiscal year. Before Madam Clerk, ask for a call of the roll and opening remarks, I just want to let anyone from the public know who's listening, there is no public commentary tonight. We have received a number of email comments. Those will be entered into the minutes of this particular meeting. So thank you for those. With that, Madam Clerk, may I ask you to call a roll, please?
She's muted.
You. Irene, you're on mute.
Oh,
There we go.
Mayor Rilling,
Present.
Mr. Abrams,
Here?
Mr. Camacho,
I'm here.
Mr. Constant,
Here.
Mr. Gilleret,
Here.
Mr. Casimis,
Here.
Miss Yang.
Present.
7, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Mr. Mayor, any opening remarks before we start to go through the information for this evening?
No, thank you. Well, I just want to say thank you to the Board of Estimate and Taxation for all the hard work that has gone on over the past couple of weeks. Also, thank and welcome our new CFO. He will be starting a week from, well, he'll be starting this coming Tuesday. And welcome him aboard as well. Look forward to having him take over and work with us for the next year or so. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and welcome, Mr. Schmidt. All right, we have a lot that we want to try and get through this evening, all in the intention of informing us so that on Monday, April 1st, we can effectively vote on an operating budget for the coming fiscal year. Some of the things that we wanted to look at this evening are the updated data on the phase-in. We've provided this board in advance additional detail on revenues and on the debt services information to see if there's any final questions there, and then review some of the different scenarios we've been looking at and their impact on mill rates and tax burden to the citizens of Norwalk. So, Tom, can I turn it to you and probably Paul to start with the phase-in discussion, and we'll take it from there?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that we thought would be helpful, since one of the primary focal points of this year's budget season has been the reval and the impact that's had on all these calculations going through the budget process, and in the end, finally, what that means to median tax bills for the average homeowner. So the Pauls, as I call them, Paul Gorman and Paul Freya, came up with a one-page Word document, which I will share with you. And we have Paul Gorman. Actually, we have both of the Pauls on the line just to sort of to walk you through this. I don't think we need to read it verbatim, but they're going to hit on the high points, what's to be gained by doing it in this method, and some of the drawbacks of it. So if Paul's one of the Pauls, if you guys are okay, I'm going to start sharing my screen with that Word doc.
Sure.
And Tom, you'll forward that document on to us.
Yeah, it's about 11 minutes old, so I didn't have a chance to to get that out to everybody.
Understood. Thank you very much.
All right. So is it viewable? Everybody okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Take it away, Paul.
Okay, so like Tom said, I'm not going to read it word for word. Basically, in a nutshell, when you do a reval, the state does allow for municipalities to phase in their values over a 2, 3, or 4 year period. We're basing everything that we're going to talk about on a 4 year phase in, just for example purposes. And you can see in the middle of the document where I broke out where districts 1 through 6, what the median tax bill would save over what a non-phased in tax bill would be. So there are some places where there's some significant savings. District 6 is at 1652, District 2 is at 1186, and it gets as small as District 5 where it's only a $256 savings. I did a further study to try to see the hurt help characteristics of doing a phase in. And you can see that in the second to last paragraph, where about 80% of the people in town would be receiving relief from doing a phase in, but about 20% of the people that would be due relief from just implementing the reval are going to be potentially or will be negatively impacted by a phase in because they're going to have to wait for the benefit that they would have received from just implementing. The final paragraph talks about how that there's just a lot of logistical information, stuff that has to go on behind the scenes to make a phase in work. So the amount of years that you do a phase in for stretches out how long that work has to be done for. It's not just my department, it's other departments, but it's a lot of my department, especially when it comes to new construction, which we have plenty of here in Norwalk, where we'll be having to run dual databases for whatever amount of years it gets determined if we do a phase in and track all the new construction separately. So, I mean, to just summarize it, there's good, there's bad, and then it just comes down to which one outweighs the other. The spreadsheets that Tom distributed earlier in the day that have the actual phase-in numbers that show median tax bills, there were the 2, 3, and 4 year programs were included on that, as well as the non-phased in version. So you could see the impact of each particular option for review.
Okay.
Well, you want to talk about like the in that second part, the 80% versus the 20%, what that equates to in terms of number of actual households for
Sure. It's about, I would say that it's about 6,500 people that make up the 20%, 20 to 25%, that are at a break point of they would be receiving a year-over-year reduction in taxes from last year to this year in a non-phased in reval. And as it says in the middle of the paragraph, that equates to you've all heard the statistics. The average residential increase was around 35%. So this break point is at about 22%. Anybody that was 21, 22% above their 18 value or less would be in the group that would have benefited from implementation. Anybody above the 22% and higher are the ones that would have been hurt by, or not, I shouldn't say hurt, but would not be receiving tax relief from a reval. They'd be receiving tax increases from the reval.
And can I answer a very quick question? So to be clear, the properties that went down in value, the commercial properties, let's say, that went down in value, or any property that went down in value, we couldn't phase in that reduction in value, right?
No, pure reductions in value have to be recognized up front per state statute on a phase-in. Right. It used to be different, but they changed it. I'm not sure what year, but they did change it, that you have to recognize the reductions up front.
This is Anne. I have a couple of questions. So in your second to last paragraph where you talk about 20% of the taxpayers will be negatively impacted by the phase-in, that is assuming that the phase-in begins at the break point. But if the phase-in begins at 0, then those that have received a tax increase, an assessment increase between 0 and 22 will get a phase-in and therefore will benefit. Isn't that correct?
I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question. You're saying when you say starting at 0, somebody that received a 0 assessment increase that stayed exactly the same, those are the people that are going to be hurt the most by a phase-in, because the closer you are to the average of 35% is going to determine how your how much your taxes would change. So if you were at a 0% increase, you're the person who would have benefited the most from just a straight implementation.
I understand, but if my taxes go up 10%, I'm sorry, my assessment went up 10%, I would have benefited because I am below the average, therefore my share of the pie went down.
Correct.
However, the way that I understood that these were calculated was that the phase-in was based purely on a phase-in starting at 0. So even though the person who received a 10% assessment increase, who would have benefited from the reval in terms of absolute dollars of taxes, they would still have some level of benefit because their 10% would be phased in over the 4-year period as well.
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah. I mean, they're not going to be, it's not going to be a complete reversal, but what they would get up front in a normal thing, they're going to have to wait for their full benefit.
Understood. And that is essentially phasing in the mix shift over that period of 4 years.
Right.
My other question now goes to the last paragraph. I don't understand why new construction performed in the city during the phase-in period would have to be valued if it was built in 2018 and then valued in 2023 and therefore have a phase-in.
That's the way the state statute is written about new construction, that you have to treat it, you have to phase in the increases in value, not only from the market change, but you phase in the increases in value from the construction itself.
I'd like to see that portion of the state statute that says that because that essentially says if there was new construction that happened in 2025, that new construction, even though it existed in 2025, gets revalued back to 2018 and therefore then phased in. I would also like to add that the commercial properties that do receive abatements currently should not receive any assessment phase-in, because effectively their assessment is being reduced by their tax abatement. So for them to get the phase-in plus the tax abatement, then they get a tax benefit twice.
But can you change the rules like that?
I don't know. We would have that's a legal question. We'd have to have a statute interpretation. I don't know that we could do that.
All right, so we're not going to answer that tonight. It is a fair question that Ms. Yang asked, and I would ask that we take that question back to Corporation Counsel or whomever we need to answer, right? Similarly, her question on the statute for new build, it seems very odd that something built in 2025 would go back to 2018. But again, please just look at the statute and let's triple check everything. I want to
Ed,
thank.
I'll print the statute. PDF the statute to you so that you could share it with the whole group.
Yep, that's part of the ask, and then the question on the abatement aspect of this from a legality perspective.
I'll
Yeah.
email Mario that question.
Yep, that's
Yeah.
all we're asking.
Yes, you could definitely send it, but with the statute, Troy, with the statute, please give us legal guidance. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, so
Right.
on the response.
Right. So look, I want to be clear, right? First, I want to thank Anne on behalf of the board for continuing to push this issue. It's gotten us to think differently, and it's gotten some good information to us. So thank you for that. Second thing I recognize is this has been a difficult beast to wrestle to the ground between getting data from QDS, 20,000 plus records, et cetera, that all came together, at various parts of the afternoon today. So the ink is not dry on it. So let's use the fact that we have a little bit of time in the workday tomorrow and Monday before our meeting to get this all crystal clear and ironed out. Fair?
Yeah.
With that said, Tom, can we kind of just flip to the spreadsheet that shows based
hold
on the
on,
existing
Ed,
data what
one-
it looks like?
Ed Destroy, one question on the screen. Did you know what the percentages will look like, Paul? I know you give me the dollar amounts here, savings, but what would the districts look like from a percentage for each district? Do you have that yet, or is it too
Well, no,
early?
that's on that's on the spreadsheet Ed was just asking about. All the percentages are on there.
Oh, okay. Let me look. Okay.
Yep. So Tom, if you could bring that up, please.
Right, do you want to go right to the mill rate one, or the mill rate and tax bills, or you want to talk?
No, the
Division-
zero, 1 year, 2 year, 3 or 4
Yeah,
year
what I call the
phasing.
division summary. All right.
It's the one that you sent out at 5:30.
So not this one, Tom. This is as you said, the division summary.
Okay.
The
let me
one that
just-
has all of the,
Yeah, I'll
year
as soon
one,
as I
year
can
two.
get my
I got it. I got it.
Yeah, the FY 25 operating budget
Yeah, that's
below the
a-
line version 12.
There it is. Is that it? Yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
On the bottom.
Let me blow that up a little bit. All right.
It's the middle of the 3 columns.
Yeah, so just for perspective, this over here is no phase in, what it looks like, and that's what our and this is all based on what the current budget is right now after the BET recommendation. So recall that that's 4% on the Board of Ed, and just under that at 3.91 on the city side. So that's what all the comparatives are for the phase in. So here in the middle is what the 4-year phase in looks like now. Again, this is district by district, so 1 through 6 across the top. And then the change in the mill rate from 24 in terms of actual basis points, and then in terms of a percentage, and then the median tax bill. So in this scenario, it's going up for the first district $573 or 9.51%. And if you were to go back over to where we are currently with no phase in, that compares to $7,600 or about $1,600 and 26%. So much more favorable under this revised scenario. And in actuality, all 3 scenarios, 2-year, 3-year, and 4-year, are favorable. 4-year and 3-year are actually very, very close. I'm going to scroll down just to the totals. The percentages are very, very similar, if not the same at the 1 decimal level. But you can see, just for example, on the first taxing district, with a savings of $2,100 versus a savings of $1,600. Again, that is the 4-year phase in over here, $2,100 versus the 3-year $1,600 here.
Can I ask a question? I'm having a difficult time wrapping my brain around this. If with a no phase in, the property value, the taxes increase, let's say, for the first taxing district is 1,567, 1,000, and second is 1,830, etc., 1,605. And then with the phase-in, suddenly the taxes go down to first taxing district 573, second 644, third 615. Now, we still have the same budgetary needs. So where's all that money coming from if everyone is paying so much less?
Yeah, so Ed, what happens here is we're phasing in both the tax bill and the revaluation for all the homes. So
Right.
what compensates for it is the mill rate under the no phase-in scenario drops to 20. Under the phase-in, it drops, but much less to 24.2269. Again, that's because of the first year phase-in on the property value. So it's taking the previous valuation and adding 25% of that to get your new year one revaluation. So that way it's sort of tempering the impact over the 4 years.
Yeah, well, putting the mill rate aside, you're still collecting, it seems that you're collecting less money per house.
No, we're still collecting the same.
So the average house in the first taxing district now pays 573 more versus the average house with no phase-in now paying 1,567 more. I don't really see where the money has gone.
But Ed, you have to look at the out years as well.
Yeah, no, I see the out years, but I'm talking about this year. In other words, so it seems that money's evaporating, and I'm not sure where. If the average homeowner is in District 1 is paying 1,567 more this year without a phase-in, essentially $1,000 more this year without a phase-in, and we still have the same budgetary needs with or without a phase-in.
But it's not the average homeowner, it's the median. So it's just the middle number amongst all the parcels in each individual district.
Right.
And that's where that 20% of the people comes in.
Got it. Okay.
They're helping foot the bill.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
Understood.
And that's why I just want to reemphasize the concept of, as you consider this, if we're going to choose an option, that we try to choose the option that at least tries to be as fair to everyone as much as possible. So maybe the 4 might be too long, the 2 might be too short, the 3 could be the right number. It's all about what becomes palatable as far as numbers go. But keeping in mind, like I said, you got those 20% of the people that are waiting for their relief to come in smaller doses, and also the logistical work that goes on running this for the number of years that we do it.
Right. My concern, if I could
where would we? Sorry.
No, go on.
No, I was just wondering. So if that 573 is the median, where could we see what that 20% would be paying?
We don't have a spreadsheet that's broken down to the individual parcel per district of what their tax bills would be. I could probably develop something with Tom and Agnes's help if it was necessary.
The population size on this data, Kendrick, is enormous. There are 29,000 different parcels in the city. So it's one of the challenges that we faced is we're working through this and making sure everything's right, but obviously it's not practical to go line by line by line.
Gotcha.
If I could suggest, mathematically, the way it would work is that if there was no phase-in, a property may have been looking at a 10% decrease in their overall taxes. But with the phase-in on the residential side, they may see more like an 8% or a 6% decrease in their taxes. they are still going to be receiving a benefit. It just won't be as large of a benefit as if the phase-in did not exist. So they'll receive a tax bill that could be flat to down, which I think most people would say that's pretty good.
My concern, if I can express it now, my concern is that when you do the phase, basically institutionalize, on average, an 8% or 9% tax increase every single year for 4 years. That's really problematic. Whereas if you don't do a phase in year 3 and year 4, you're back to what the tax increases had been over the last 12 years or 10 years at least. Three no more than under 4%.
Right.
But with to do a phase in, you're going to have people have to get used to paying on average 9.5% taxes over the course of 4 years. Tax increases. That's really a very difficult pill for to swallow.
Look, there's no question that look, the revaluation has impact, period. This is a way to spread that impact so that it's not all in one bite, right? Versus the no phase-in option, right? The no phase-in option is you bite all this increase in year 1, period, right? This is not a panacea. This does not solve it. It simply spreads that pain out over the course of 4 years, or 3 years, or 2 years.
But isn't that assuming that
No,
the amount of the budget is going to be exactly what they're projecting here for the next 4 years?
Yeah, so into this model, Artie, we built in, I don't know if you could see it down on the bottom, but the assumptions are it's 3% increase.
Yeah.
Board of Ed, 3% increase for the city, an $8 million drawdown each year.
Yeah.
And one of the other things that helped us, and you see that in the revenue file, is we were able to grab what we call a few one-time only
I saw that.
revenue gains, some settlements and such like that. But it's very, very difficult to expect that year over year.
But aren't you also going to get additional tax revenues as the abatements begin to lapse with this new construction and all the new construction that we're doing now? Isn't that so? Shouldn't we expect additional revenues as well?
Yeah, that'll help, but I don't know how much it will.
This Troy, listen, yeah, and I understand your question. It's 30. If you look at the before and after, District 1 was, Tom, correct me, I'm trying to look at this. 30. What's District 1 without the phase in 30?
It's over here, 75.92.
26.
Yeah.
And 26%, 70.
Okay, and it goes to the 4-year phase into what, 9% in year 1?
Yeah,
9.5.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're not right. It's not, we're not getting rid of the 36%. We're just moving it, trying to make it more palatable.
Yeah.
So yes, I mean, it's not any trickery or anything. We just were saying it's easier maybe for people to have to come up with 9% than 36% out of nowhere, 30% out of nowhere in a single year. And regarding the abatements, the schedule that Paul, you sent me, I looked it up. And first of all, my question is, are these all the abatements that are currently on the books? Am I sure I'm looking at the total number at this point that you sent?
That is all the abatements that I'm aware of as far as the enterprise zone goes. Those are the only abatements that I manage.
Okay, well, for the next 3 years, and correct me if I'm wrong, I added the year 1, year 2, year 3, 122,119,119. So the next 3 years, the abatement number is really not going to change a heck of a lot. Obviously, the mall is the biggest part of those numbers, but so that's not a big number. That's not going to be going on. What's going to help, obviously, are the projects that are currently online, like coming online soon, like I guess Wegmans, I guess the Sono train station, and I guess the Y, and across the street from the Y. Is that fair to say, Paul, Tom?
I mean, yes, the grand list growth will help. It just depends upon how much the grand list growth is. Like I don't from what I've been told, Wegmans will not be done by October 1st. So they're only going to be a partial ad for the 2024 grand list. There'll be
Yeah, I'm talking
full
about
ad
for
for
the
the
next,
2025.
No,
I'm talking for the next 3 years.
Yeah, so I mean, grand list growth hopefully will continue to happen as permits are pulled. And we, in some of the meetings that we've talked to, nobody actually mentioned actual projects, but I guess planning and zoning does have a list of potential projects up for approval that could be counted on. We just don't know
Yeah.
how much they're going to be worth.
And also, isn't it possible, or are we not able to conduct a reval, let's say in year 3? Do we have to do one? I mean, are we limited to every 5 years? Can we do one in the 3rd year if we think that might help matters?
You mean like, could we do a midstream reval?
Yeah, can we do a reval, or do we have to wait for the full 5 years to do it?
I believe we have to wait for the full 5 years. Again, I would have to look at the statutes for that, but I've never heard of anyone applying to reval early.
Well, I
So
think,
traditionally it's 5 years,
guys,
right? Every 5 years.
there's a few things here, right? Just to come back, right? Because all of this is modeled data. We've got to understand that, right? We don't know how much the grand list will or will not grow. We assume a 3% spend increase in this. That could be higher, lower,
Right.
doesn't matter. But it's basically modeled data, and it shows a story that simply says we can spread the pain over a 2, 3, 4 year period so that it is more tolerable, but it is still going to be an increase over whatever that time frame is. For the purposes of what we're doing, I think it's a very set of binary questions, right? Do we believe that a phase in is something we should support and recommend? If yes, then the question after that becomes, based on the modeled data, do we believe a 2, 3, or 4 year phase in would be most palatable to the citizens of Norwalk? So the first question to us will be, do we believe a phase in makes sense?
I might be misunderstanding, but Mr. Camacho brings up a good point where it's like there's that missing 1K, and it's like a missing part of the model that kind of makes it unclear how the tax costs will be distributed.
Kendrick, I'm sorry, I'm not following you, right?
So- Right,
that's
so-
not missing. It's that extra $1,000, if you look at year 2, year 3, year 4, is spread into that period. Artie, you very politely have your hand raised.
All right, just a quick question. I don't know who can answer this, but if we do the 4-year phase in, how is that going to affect the real estate market in year 2, 3, and 4? If somebody knows that their taxes are going to go up automatically by 9, 10% every year, is it going to affect it at all?
I believe it will affect it less than if people see a 36% increase in their taxes. Because the 36% increase in their taxes becomes a new baseline going forward. A 4-year phase-in is essentially a bridge to the next revaluation, where at that time, the commercial market may have recovered such that we're not pricing a set of tax increases at the bottom of the commercial market. So a phase-in you will see a much more gradual discount of real estate taxes impacting the overall value.
I tend to agree with that
Okay.
statement, but I would remind us all it's opinion on all of us. It's a fair set of assumptions, but it is an opinion.
Ed, getting back to your question you just stated a minute ago. Yes, conceptually, I think we have to look at, I'm comfortable. I like what I'm seeing on the 4-year phase-in. First of all, I like the phase-in concept. Second of all, I like to try to, spread out the pain as long as possible, and realizing that there are assumptions in there. And thirdly, I think the next discussion we have to have, I'm assuming everyone has that comment, is I think we can do a little better than the assumptions that were made here with the 4, and the 8. 4%, and the 8.
Yep.
Okay.
Completely agree on that second point, Troy, but let's hold it.
Good.
And see this. Somebody needs to tell me from a point of order perspective, because I don't want to vote on a phase-in, but I want to see if there is consensus in wanting to move in that direction. Am I allowed to ask that question in such a way that this does not become a formal vote, since we're not voting on anything budget-wise this evening?
Yeah. I think we're just
You
having a
are, yep.
discussion. Yeah. My personal opinion is that it's somewhat inflammatory to talk about percentages like a 32% increase or 26% increase, because we really are with phase-in, we're talking about, in some cases, the difference of $1,000 spread over 12 months, which is a lot. There's no question about that. That's a lot of money, certainly for most people. But it's a
I think we
more or
lost the
less.
screen.
I'm sorry, what's that?
Never mind.
Okay. Yeah, so Ed is off the screen. So we're talking, so in terms of dollars, it's a lot, but we're going to lock in that pain for 4 years. That to me is to get people used to it, and on average, and I haven't done the average, but an average of 9% taxes, increasing their real estate taxes year in, year out. When we're really asking people, let's say the median tax increase of $100, $120 a month for 12 months, or whatever that $1,000 would come out to. So it's less than that. It's less than $100 a month. It's a big bite, but I think to get it done in year one and then get back to our usual 3.5% tax increases in year 3 and 4, I think is more hopeful than locking in an average of 9% tax increases year in, year out for the next 4 years. And particularly when you're talking about the dollars, when you're talking about percentages, it seems like a lot. And when you're talking about dollars, it's also a lot. But it's less than $100 a month for the first taxing district that we're asking, or that the no phase-in would cost above the phase-in. And then you get it done, like over and done with. And then you start to go back to more realistic tax increases that I think will positively impact the housing market. And I do think that institutionalizing a 9 or 10% tax increase for 4 years will have a negative impact on this market.
Okay.
That's fine.
Any other points of view?
The other point here is, over this 4-year phase-in, we are going to have new properties coming onto the market, which is going to increase the grand list, which mitigate, the second year, if we have enough increase in the grand list, maybe it's 8% instead of 9%. But I think people would rather, I personally, if your tax bill is going to be $10,000, that, and rather than paying $20,000 next year, that you're going to pay $12,250, $15,000, $17,250, and then $20,000. In aggregate, you will save dollars, as can be seen in the red number in the middle column. Those are gross dollar savings to those who have increases in their assessment over the period of time to spread it out. But I think what happened here is the shift between commercial and residential. And we're saying that commercial is going to grow. So therefore, that shift may be mitigated purely by the growth. So therefore, we can, with commercial growth, the increases get further mitigated.
But that's also true in years 2, 3, and 4 of the no phasing.
That is a correct statement. All right. So at this point,
If I, Ed, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just
go ahead, Paul.
just want to throw in, I mean, yes, grand list growth will help, but it's not going to be like this massive thing that's going to knock the mill rate down a point or a half a point. I mean, typically growth, I would have to run the numbers because I haven't been here long enough to know what the average growth is over like the last 5 or 6 years. But typically, I mean, if you get 1 or 2% growth, that's a pretty good growth to your grand list. And the effect that that has overall on the mill rate is not going to balance out budgetary concerns. It's going to just mitigate them a bit.
Yep. Okay. What I think I'd like to propose to the board for a minute is that we pause on this discussion for a minute, keep this here, but switch the discussion to the various budget scenarios that we looked at, because I think if you take that data along with some of this phasing, it may, depending upon what we decide we're comfortable with doing from a budget perspective, it could change how we feel about phasing. If we are dramatic in budget cuts, 26% could become something significantly less, which then potentially reduces the need for phasing. So unless anybody disagrees, Tom, I'd like to switch to those scenarios that we looked at and kind of discuss those for a moment.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to make one further comment, which is that we have received a lot of feedback, both at the public hearing and in written form. And the majority of that feedback advocates for some kind of phase-in and for some kind of shift. So we need to listen to that.
Understood, and that's why, Ann, I think that looking at the different scenarios starts to address some of the feedback that we've all heard.
Ed, one more thing before we should, just Paul, somebody tell me, Stanford is going through this too. Are they doing a phase-in, and how many years? Does anyone know?
Stanford is in a phase-in, and they're in year 2 of a 2-year phase-in.
Okay.
But their commercial property values didn't go down as much as ours.
Yeah, I know it wasn't exactly like ours, but they are.
They revalved the year before us.
I'm just talking about the phase-in concept. It's being used close to home here. Okay.
Yeah, and just and to that point, so Stanford revalued the year before us. So I'm not entirely sure that we're locked into having to do it every 5 years. Because I think that's another little piece of the puzzle you might want to consider or
Yeah.
at least explore.
And I did get some feedback from someone that we can reval on a yearly basis. The only problem is every time you reval, you're going to spend $1 million.
Got it. Well, might be money well spent depending on the year.
Well, I mean, and again, I don't want to belabor the point, but none of us has a crystal ball to know what the
Right.
market's going to do. And you could do another reval, and then all of a sudden the shift is even greater.
Right.
It's a double-edged sword.
All right, so let's bring up those scenarios, Tom, if we can.
Hey, can we see those?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so under these scenarios, this assumes no phase in. So you'll recognize the 26.01% in the first district, no phase in as is now. So this is where we are in the yellow based on the 4% for the Board of Education and the BET recommended cuts that brought it down to 3.91% on the city side. And just to give you comparison, here's the impact of the reval highlighted and flat year to year. In other words, if we just did a copy and paste on the budget, didn't touch a thing, and just implemented the reval, this would be the impact on people's tax bills and the percentages. So it goes anywhere from just under 1% to 26% in the second district. So the intent of that is just to show you how dramatic the reval was in combination with the shift from the commercial to the residential side. And then we start going down with the different scenarios. This is the reval only. This is Board of Ed, police, fire, public works at 0%, and then for all else, 5% reduction. So we consider these the essential services, and this is the general government and all other areas. So this is what it would look like with a 5% reduction across the board. Now keep in mind, we are locked in contractually to union contracts that average somewhere between 2.35% and 3.5%, every year. So if we can't touch those, then you have to start looking at the other variable expenses, which then becomes somewhere between 10 and 15% you have to cut in order to make up for what we call the fixed costs, like contracts. So just moving down the line, this is Board of Ed, essential services at 0, all else 5% reduction, $8 million drawdown. Again, this is from fiscal year 24. This is from where we are right now in 2025. So it's a 5% reduction of what's in the yellow shade. And then finally down here, 0% on the Board of Ed, everybody cut 5%. So again, we start cutting, if we have to, we can't touch pensions or health benefits and things like that. So again, for anything that's argued as variable, that would be a significant impact. And then finally, the last scenario, 0% for the Board of Ed because of the minimum budget requirement, and then a 5% reduction for the city across the board and 8 million. So these are the impacts to the tax bill. So it varies anywhere from 20% to say 16 down here.
So again, to the point, Ann, that you made about what we've heard from the public on, taking a hard look at the needs versus the wants, taking a hard look at the city services, everything from just a flat budget year to year to a very aggressive 5% across everything. There are some meaningful impacts here. There are also some significant trade-offs here. At the same time, we've heard about funding the needs, not the wants. We also heard a portion of the population talk about not wanting to see degradation in city services associated at the same time that we're seeing significant tax increases. So look, we can probably say there are other combinations that we could look at here, but it starts to give us a sense of what can we do, what can't we do, what are the impacts. And the reason I wanted to show this as well is because, again, you think about that 26%, dependent upon what we cut for the year, you know, that's a lesser one-time hit to swallow. You know, if you were to go flat to last year, right, you're talking about in District 1, a 19.6% one-time increase. It's still a significant increase, but maybe it doesn't require phasing associated with it, as an example. So thoughts and reactions to the different scenarios?
If I could comment. So
Please.
first, there are three parties to the increase in budget and within this valuation. There's the residential sector, the commercial sector, and there's the city. There are three legs to the stool. With no phase-in and no change in the city budget, the residents bear 100% of this shift. If we include the phase-in, then the commercial, or those that have had reductions in their value, bear some of the shift, because they're going to be viewing potentially down taxes. And I would argue that while the budget increase is not necessarily out of line given inflation, but given the level of pain that everyone is going to feel, the city needs to share the pain as well. Now, if we look at scenario 2, with the reval and a flat city and a flat Board of Education budget, that's, and Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, $17 or $18 million. That's $10 million out of the Board of Education budget. And that's $7 million out of the city budget, out of a total budget that people were looking at of 440. I think we can find $17 million.
I think if we talk about taking $10 million from the Board of Ed, the parents of the city will revolt.
Remember, we're not taking,
Well,
we're simply
not yet.
keeping it flat year to year.
Right.
Yeah.
And for them, they're going to view it as basically, so this is the second time in the last 5 years that we've held them flat. And it's, there's going to be the parents will just, it's not going to go well at all.
Then I would argue that it's not as if the city is not funding the Board of Ed. If we are spending out of pocket $24,000 per pupil, and then fully loaded gets us to north of $40,000 per pupil, then we are spending the money. Maybe the money is not being spent as efficiently as it could be.
They have contractual increases too, and they're going to have to lay off a ton of teachers.
There was
I'm not. Go, hang on. And Troy, you're trying to make a comment. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Ed, I just wanted one thing. First of all, if you look at their book, we have not, the Board of Ed has not been flat the last, I'm looking at 5 years. It was 4%, 4.5%. The pandemic year was 0, 5, 4. So, I mean, that number flat is not the right number to say, Ed.
I thought we did hold flat one.
Is it, I'm sorry, what?
I thought we did flat fund them year.
No,
I
last year
think
they asked for 12.
No.
Last year they asked for 12. We gave them 4. Okay.
No, not last year. It was a couple.
But the pandemic year, that was because of all of the additional
ARPA money.
ESSER and
The
ARPA
ARPA
funding.
Yeah, exactly right.
Okay,
So the
I'm
budget
making
did
that
increase.
point.
It
They
just
have
didn't
not
come
been
from the
flat.
city.
So
Right.
they have not been flat at all. And And I agree with what Ann said about the three legs of the stool. You have the, everyone has to share this pain. Nobody likes this. I hate it. But I think all three phases of it, like she said, have to share. In what that number is, obviously we have to get to it, but this is not fun at all. It's very painful.
Other comments, thoughts, and reactions?
Just, once again, keeping in mind the actual dollars we're talking about, scenario one and scenario where we hold everything flat, and the Board of Ed, police, etc. No, the one that we hold it flat, the difference is $400 divided by 12 months, for the highest paying homeowners, for the median, properties. That's a very small gain for a lot of pain.
That's a point of view, because some people, $400 is a significant amount of money.
Right.
Right.
Would say that if the city is asking a resident to find money from their budget and cut their budget in order to fund city spending, the city should be able to do that well.
I'd like to hear, Artie, from you, and then Kendrick on your points of view. Artie first.
This is difficult. I mean, I share everybody's pain. I'm talking from as a pastor's salary. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to make up all the money, taxes that are coming through. Other people are probably more well off than I am, have a different salary. But I understand we're in this all together, and we've got to come up with the best decision for the whole city.
Okay, thank you, Artie. Kendrick.
Yeah, these scenarios laid out, it seems like the phase-ins would be the best option.
Okay, but Kendrick, the phase-in is a slightly, you could, against any of these scenarios, you can then do a phase-in, right?
Okay.
So,
And
Okay.
Yeah, assuming we do a phase in, which we haven't decided, but assuming we did a 4-year phase in, you would take each one of the scenarios and look at what those numbers would be, and obviously they would be
Apply the phase-in.
they'd be a lot
Okay.
more palatable with one of these options other than the
Yeah.
first one.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Can we
Oh,
sorry.
Yeah,
go
I
ahead, finish, Kendrick.
Yeah, I think my only concern was I think column 3, where it's like maintaining the needs, but reducing the wants, the 5% reduction elsewhere. That way the city doesn't feel a decrease in the quality of the services the city provides. That would be the best scenario. 3A is what I'm looking at.
Yeah, but just to reiterate what I started with, Kendrick, so to get to a 0% for any of those areas, in light of the 3% for all the union contracts, that's massive cuts on anything that's variable. So it's not like they could just freeze where they are. They would have to make some dramatic reductions as well.
Tom,
So look, go ahead, Ann.
Tom, could you confirm the aggregate number if we're looking at a flat city and a flat BOE compared to our 440 budget that we've been discussing this whole time? Is the difference $17 million? Maybe it's $19 million?
Yeah, and Tom, flat Board of Ed and flat city in my numbers last year, are you taking the 423 number as a start, or are you taking out the rainy day, whatever we took, 6 million with that
It
number?
was the 423.
$17 million out of a
Okay.
budget of 440. That's 4%.
All right, Artie, you're again being very polite with your hand.
Yes. I don't know if this was asked before, but is there a scenario where we just give the increase according to what's contractually obligated?
That we didn't build a scenario that way. And I am doing this from memory, which is very dangerous. But as I recall all of the reviews we did, a contractually obligated increase is going to be very, very close to scenario one here, because most of the city, on the city side, most of the city departments came back with the majority of their increase tied directly to contractually committed salary.
Yeah.
So it will
I agree
be
with that.
somewhat lower.
And
You're
even
right.
Somewhat lower than that, but
You're right.
not significantly.
Okay, thanks.
I'd like to go back to the public comment. We have received a lot of very thoughtful public comment where people have written, 300, 500 words. That's probably taking them at least an hour or two, if not 3 or 4 hours to write. There are some very, very good suggestions and thoughtful suggestions in there. I think that we should aggregate those suggestions, and those suggestions should be reviewed against making these potential budget cuts, which may deal less in the essential services, but perhaps more in the wants column. And I think we should listen. We need to listen to the people who have sent in comments.
And I would agree with you. I would also tell you that aggregating those comments at this time and trying to reconstruct a budget based on that, with City Hall closed tomorrow for the Good Friday holiday, and with our need to approve a budget on Monday, April 1st, is unfortunately a little unrealistic. Instead, looking at some of these scenarios which address a lot of those comments is kind of where we are. Artie, you had your hand up again, or
Is there a way to get an extension on the April 1st so we can really mull through this a little bit more? Because we got a lot of this we just got.
That's above my pay grade to know the
Okay.
answer to that question.
It's in the
Tom,
chat. I see Tom Livingston on. If I don't know if you could jump in and opine on.
Well, it's that the April 1st date is in the charter itself. So I don't really know how we would do that.
If I could make,
We could talk to Mario, but I don't know offhand.
Yeah, there usually is something built in to accommodate some situations like we're in right now, where we've tried to get the numbers and the numbers were just not coming out. And so I think there could be something where we might be able to get an extension. But if we set the tax rate, we can still make changes later on. It's not that it's carved in stone forever, but we have to at least get on April 1st, give them the tax rates and the fact that we're under the cap.
Okay, Anne, were you, go ahead.
I thought, well, first off, it is appropriate for this board to set a set of, increases, and we leave it to the mayor and Mr. Livingston and the department heads to get to those budgetary numbers, and that we aggregate the public input, and I'm happy to do that. I will do that. It won't take me very long. We had 25 people come up, and we've probably had about a dozen people write in. I can aggregate where people thought we should cut. And with that those suggestions from the public as to where we cut, then the mayor and management and department heads can get to our recommended budget, whether it's flat or, you know, whatever reductions that we would look at. And I did read the charter, and I thought that we needed to recommend the budget at the beginning of April, but then that then goes to the Common Council, but then we have the opportunity to reset the budget, but we do the mill rates. We announce the mill rates at the end of April or beginning of May. So there's a 1 month time period between the budget and the mill rates, which will give us time to make sure that the calculations relative to the phase-in are accurate and appropriate.
That is my understanding as well, but that budget does need to be set on the first according to the chart.
Yes. So we can vote on a budget that could be a 0% increase or whatever, but then the mayor decides where to make that $17 million in cuts and takes the public's viewpoints under advisement.
Yep.
Yeah, and I have to agree with that. I would say that we would recommend the budget. If there are cuts, I would leave those decisions up to the respective the city and the board to make where they want to make those. I don't want to get into I do not want to get into a line by line item. I don't think that's our responsibility.
No, it is not. It is not. Right.
You know, we're also talking about zero, flat funding and 5% reduction. You know, there are things in between those two things as well. So it doesn't have to be one or the other. So in other words, if we were to 1 or 2% the Board of Ed and 3% reductions elsewhere, there's still room for improvement without negatively impacting a significant negative impact on our services. And as been mentioned several times here, the contractual obligations that we can't do anything about, that there's guaranteed increases in benefits and guaranteed increases in wages that have already been negotiated and cannot, and I don't imagine we'd get the unions back to the table to reconsider those negotiations, although we can always ask, but I don't think that would be any success at all.
And
go ahead, Mr.
Yeah, I
Camacho.
was just going to say that if we tweak it like that, which there is a universe between zero and between a flat funding and a 5% reduction, but when you start tweaking it between those two things, you're still, in terms of dollars and cents, you really aren't making much of a difference.
Correct.
Correct. Mr. Camacho, I would respectfully disagree, because if you're asking me in the first district to come up with another $1,200 or $1,600 out of my budget, which my budget could be flat, and the city goes up 4%, to me that says that is not shared pain.
But you're looking at the city as if it's an adversary. The city provides valuable services to you and to me. So it's not us or them. It's all of us. We are one and the same.
Agree wholeheartedly, but I would also say that there's elements in the budget that fit in the wants category and not the needs category.
Okay.
I think that this year it seems that this year that's not so much the case. I think the city came in I think everyone came in only with contractual increases, most of the city side anyway. So I don't know that there is a whole lot of wants in here.
There were a lot of wants that we pulled back on, including zero hires of extra people. There were a lot of things that people asked for that we said, no, this is not the year for that. And I get it, but as I said, if you look at you look at the 3.91 that we're looking at for the city. Okay, some of the contractual increases are 2.35. And in negotiations, though, once you negotiate something, it's hard to get any union to back down or to agree to a lesser amount. It's just these are challenging times. Inflation is out of control, and we saw what happened with the reval. That's nothing that anybody could control because the commercial side is not as the empty or the vacancies in office rate. We've never seen anything like that in years, where there's so much vacancies in the offices that are even considering now converting to residential.
If I could add that we're very close on debt service. That is a big burden. And with adding the schools, we're going to add more debt, and we're going to be bumping up pretty darn close to the max of what we can borrow without losing our AAA. If we decide as a city and as a board that losing our AAA and going down to AA, then so be it. That will increase our borrowing costs. But with the level of capital expenditures expected, we are going to need perhaps some forbearance by the rating agency. So the faster that we show true fiscal discipline, like a flat budget, the better we will be in our standing with the rating agency going forward.
I don't disagree. I will offer one other piece of data and context, right? On the city side, or if we were to be flat year to year, you are talking about roughly a $6.5 million decrease across all city departments from what was asked, right? On a 160 some odd $1 million budget. I understand there are contractually committed aspects, but finding 3.9% or $6.5 million, while challenging, I don't view as an impossible task that will dramatically impact the level of city service, that will be felt negatively by those of us in the community. I just, again, I live in a corporate world, and if I'm told I got to go find $6.5 million out of my budget, I'll find it. And chances are I can do it without touching headcount. Right? It's not fun. It's not pretty, but to all the points raised, right? This is not a normal time.
In terms of dollars and cents, though, Ed, how much would that save? Would $6 million save on a tax bill of $1,567?
Well, it's saving $400 for that taxpayer, but it is showing that the city, to Ms. Yang's point, is trying to solve for the challenge we're dealing with, that it's not all on the burden of the taxpayer.
But would it be $400 for that first taxing district of median?
If I look at these numbers correctly, yeah, because the tax bill would be it's slightly less than that, but you go from a tax bill of 7592 to 7203.
And the 7203 is up from 6,000.
Right.
Yeah, Ed, I agree with you 100%, Ed. Listen, I came from a corporate life. You came from corporate life. You've seen it. It's horrifying. They say from the top down, things, projections didn't come in the way we wanted. We want a 15% cut, and they tell each department, you get it now. I mean, I think we're in a very difficult situation here. We're trying to spread the pain as much as we can with the phase in and with these anticipated discussions about flat. And yes, there are painful decisions that have to be made. And I think, like you said, I think we can find them. Is it something we are anxious to do? No, but it's something I think we have to do as our fiduciary responsibility, because Ann made a good point. We got a lot of stuff coming down. We haven't even talked about the capital budget. We have a lot of stuff coming down the pipe. And we all know that the state does not refund us immediately. There is some delay, and we're looking at some very big projects. So it's just something we just have to deal with and live within our means. That's all.
Any other comments on any of this? All right, then here's what I would propose we do. There were a few earlier questions about the phase-in, the charter on, or on a few things. Paul, you've got those to-dos. I would ask us, Tom, for our meeting Monday night, if we could run the phase-in numbers on scenario 2 here, a flat budget. Because on Monday, I think what we have to decide is, and I don't want to get into in-between numbers of, well, let's take it from 3.9 to 1.9 or things like that. We're dancing on the head of a pin here. I think we need to decide as a board, are we comfortable with just a phase-in impact and the recommended budgets of 3.9 and 4%? Are we comfortable with a flat budget? And with a flat budget, do we feel that we want to add a phase-in on top of that? Because again, I take Mr. Camacho's point very seriously about, you know, the long-term impact of knowing I am facing 6-7% annual tax increases over a 4-year period. Recognizing again that the grand list is going to change, those numbers are all modeled, but that modeling is all we have to work off of. From those two things, we can then get to a vote on which approach we want to take. I don't expect, ladies and gentlemen, that we will reach consensus across the board. I don't expect this to be a unanimous vote, but I think those are the legitimate options in front of us at this point in time that I would ask us all to take the time over the weekend to really search your conscience and come prepared to vote what you think is most appropriate. Does anyone have issue with that as a way forward?
No.
No, I think that's fine, but I would like just a little bit more information. I'm not sure how difficult it is to put this together. But if we, you know, we talked about the phase-in, and then these other scenarios of, you know, keeping the budget flat, the reduction, you know, one side of the budget, not the other, et cetera. Is there some way to merge these two pieces of information so we can?
Yeah, that's what I'm basically asking, Ed. What we saw in the phase-in earlier,
Right,
is basically the phase-in on the yellow boxes
Right.
here. I want an alternate version of the phase-in on scenario 2 here.
okay, as opposed to all the scenarios. I guess that's what I was saying. Because you think the only realistic other scenario 2, is that what you're saying?
Personally, this is my opinion. I don't speak on behalf of the board. We all vote, but I think any of the other scenarios that show reductions in the face of union contracts, everything else really are not realistic.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
So Ed, you're recommending, what was it, a flat budget you said on Monday, for Monday?
I would like to see a flat budget with phase-in as well as what we saw earlier with phase-in, and then we can have the conversation on, are we in agreement on flat, or do we have a majority on flat? And then based on that majority, do we feel that we want to phase in along with that, or do we want the second district to just deal with 1 year pain of 25% and then just be done? Those are the two things we have to come to conclusion on Monday.
Good.
And there are other items on our agenda for Monday. It is a regular meeting. So I'd like us to be able to really think about this so that we'll take as long as it takes, but I would prefer not to be in session until 11:30 p.m. on Monday.
The agenda is pretty, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Tom.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, the agenda is pretty light. There's just one transfer, nothing for contingency. And we've got to review and vote on the capital transmittal letter. That is not line item by project. That's just a summary of how much we're recommending to the Common Council.
Yep, understood. But it's still, there are other items.
Yeah.
Artie, you are so polite tonight.
Well, just one more thought. Are we solid on the $8 million drawdown, or can we take down more?
A number of conversations with our bond advisor on that, Artie. They thought that we were okay going from 6 million to 8 million because we had a compelling reason this year. That would be the revaluation and the commercial, the residential shift. They cautioned us fairly strongly about going to 10 and also
Okay.
not to make the 8 a habit.
Okay.
But did they suggest that 9 would be an issue?
Probably not one as a one time, probably not.
Well-
Again, by the time you take 1 million through all these models, it's more than pennies a day for the average taxpayer, but not a lot more.
Right.
Thanks.
Any other comments from anyone, board member or otherwise? Mr. Mayor, any closing remarks?
No, I just think we are going over various scenarios. I appreciate that fact. I'm confident that we can come up with something that will be more palatable, I hope. It's a challenge. There's a lot of things that we need to look at and figure out what's in the best interest of the city and how we can move forward. And again, I'd like to welcome our new CFO. I have lots of hope and good feelings about him and his talents that he will bring to the city.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And again, Mr. Schmidt, you're walking into a wonderfully fun time. With that, ladies and gentlemen, may I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Thank you, Artie. We are adjourned. Thank you all. We will speak again on Monday.
All right.
Thanks, Ed.
Bye, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Yeah,
You too.
You too.
Great holiday for those celebrating.
Happy holidays, everyone. They're celebrating. Yes.